Greetings everyone, welcome to this new build guide. We're gonna take a look at my Righteous Fire character, and you can see here in the background that we're running a tier 16 Minotaur map and also a Hydra map, I believe, and the clear speed is top notch in this build. The AoE of Righteous Fire is huge. Depending how you scale it, you can make it even bigger if you want to and increase the clear speed. I went for a little bit hybrid between defense and damage. And as you can see here also in the background, I am face tanking the Minotaur boss and the Shaper balls and the electric fence all at once, and it's barely touching me. So this build is 100% tank, like so tanky, and they're so easy to play because it's a 0 button build. You don't even push anything. Everything is basically just Righteous Fire. As long as you're running, you're gonna kill everything, and you can just stand there if you want to. But we are helping it along a little bit with Cyclone to apply our curses and our elemental equilibrium. But we'll talk about that in the next part of this guide. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start talking about our gear here. This is considered the budget version of this build. If you want the more expensive one, that would be with 2 scepters and a helmet, pseudo 6-link, where you craft burning damage, or not burning damage, but socketed spells are supported by burning damage, and another support that is good is like concentrated effect and area of effect and stuff like that. But I think this one is much more achievable for everyone else, and I figured like I just wanted to see if I could league start this next one, or at least pick it as my second character when I don't have a lot of currency. I don't want to craft a lot. I just want to map, because this one is extremely strong when it comes to mapping. It's basically invincible, and as you can see, it has really good clear speed. So I went with a 2-handed version, and we're using a unique weapon here. This one is really inexpensive. This weapon right here is just 1 chaos or something like that. And if you want it 6-linked, of course you have to pay like 2.5, 2 exalted or something like that now for this. So it's not a super expensive for a 6-link, so very achievable. Same with the Combs Heart, very cheap. You want as much life on this build as you possibly can, because its scales are RF, not as much anymore as after the nerf a few leagues back, but still its scales are damaged quite substantial. And these Combs Ways you can easily get through prophecies. You have to upgrade them, the first version of these rings, but these are also very inexpensive items. So all our uniques here cost almost nothing. They're like a few chaos, 5 chaos tops or something like that. So with that said, that means we can focus all our energy on our rare gear here, which means that we can put on all our currency into that in later game, which is a huge relief. And also, because we're using so many endurance charges, we do not need capped on resistance, because every endurance charge gives us resistance on top of already physical reduction and stuff like that. So let's start with our helmet here. Our helmet obviously should be having as much life as possible, some resistance to just get that close to resistance cap. We are not even resistance cap here, but if you can see here, if I'm using my Enduring Cry, we get it up all. As you can see, we're getting super overpowered here with our resistance. So we are not worrying too much. I could improve my rolls on my gear and just get resistance cap anyway, but it's not needed. I'm using Malevolence, reduce mana reservation on my helmet, because that lets me, together with everything else, use Aspect of the Spider also, which I have on my boots. That means I have Pure of Fire, Malevolence, Aspect of the Spider, and Vitality all activated at once, which helps me a little bit. I mean, it's not super important to fit in Aspect of Spider. I just could, so I did it. Otherwise, this helmet it looks very good, and it would probably be very expensive if I sold it, but it's super easy to make. I'm telling you right now, because as long as you block, I had fire resistance on this, and then I just slammed this with physical damage hits taken as fire damage, and nearby enemies have a -9% to fire resistance. Those are guaranteed to slam. If you use harvest crafting and augment fire, those are guaranteed to be on there if you have a fire resistance. And all you do then, you just convert the fire resistance to a resistance you want after you're done with that. And voila, you have a GG helmet just as mine. For our gloves, we using the same principle here. We just take on one of our resistance, convert it to fire, and then slam it with an augment and harvestcraft, and we get fire damage over time multiplier. And I just bought a pair of gloves with strength and the life roll there. That's all I had on it, and then I just crafted on everything else, as you can see here. For our belt, a little bit harder if you want all these 3 rolls of life here. But what I did was I had maximum life, increased maximum life percentage, and then I slammed with another life modifier, and I blocked off my prefix, so that could not be there. So that means I'm gonna have 1 out of 2 mods, which is increased life recovery rate, one of them, if it is on an elder base. I did this on 2 other belts before I got the right one, so it is a little bit harder, but increased life recovery rate is just absolutely not needed. We have so much regen in this build, it's not even funny. I just wanted to min-max my build a little bit more, and if you don't do this, you're not gaining any damage from it. You're barely gaining anything from it, because I have not died yet, so it does not really matter. Then we have our boots here. We are having aspect of spider on them because I had an open suffix. You can use bestiary craft for this one. Just aspect of spider, just go there, buy the beast, and then just craft it, the terminology like that. Maximum endurance charges is a little bit harder because it does not have a tag attached to it. So you basically have to buy a pair, or you can you can do it however you want, but I just bought a pair with the right rolls, and then I crafted on the rest of it by myself. So I had one with endurance charges and increased movement speed. Then you can just craft on the rest of the things on there. Because life you can craft on with harvest craft, resistance you can do the same there, and we're already using aspect of spider, which makes it easier for us to hit all the good mods on this one. But I would recommend that you have regenerate 2% of life per second if you were hit recently, because it helps us with our survivability. Again, not needed, just a luxury if you want any of the enchants on the boots. And I think we're finally at our amulet. This one, all you need to do is take 2 different amulets, one hunter and one, which one is it? Is it warlord? I never remember the different signs, but and one you roll to level of all fire skill gems, and the other one plus to level of all intelligence skill gems. Then you are using an awakener orb, slam it together and pray that you get something good. Even if you don't get anything good, you can still re-roll it, because both of these are prefixes, which means that you can use the harvest craft, which is keeping all the prefixes and re-rolling all the suffixes. And then you can just keep on doing this until you hit something good. I needed some, I could re-roll this one, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out on the first try, so I'm keeping it for now. Obviously the lightning resistance should be probably a little bit better. But that's basically it. If I want more damage, I could try to craft on this. I've not had any luck so far, but it could increase my damage quite substantial if I start crafting on some good mods here. I fractured it, by the way, and I got level of spell gems, so really good there. Profane Proxy is a very good ring if you do not want to have reserved mana for one of your curses, or just it just boosts damage quite a lot if they're running around and cursing. So this is a budget option in the beginning if you want to, but I would still go with these ones. So with that said, I think we have covered all the gear. Let's go to the next. For my flasks, I have a lot of options here for you, but basically it's always a Quicksilver flask to keep that movement speed up, and because we have so much regen and other things, I am just going for more movement speed on this one. So increased movement speed during flask effect is always good here. Second one I would recommend if you are gonna go even tankier is Roomies. I could probably take this one out now because I have so much life, so much damage reduction on other sources, so it's not really needed anymore. You could put in a Dying Sun here. It was gonna give us a little bit more clear speed and stuff like that if we just want something for really good mapping. Otherwise, we just want something with bleed immunity, because bleeding is obviously a problem. We have a lot of life, but the bleeding is taking a lot of life also, and we might out regen it, I don't know. I just like to have a bleeding flask, and we're using it on a quartz flask, so it just can get facing so we can run right through our enemies, which is always very helpful because that's what we're doing with this build. We're just running through everything. And then we're using a silver flask with Onslaught here. It's just some extra movement speed, and also we are traveling faster with dash and everything like that. So a good one. And freeze immunity is really good also. Honestly, if you open a box and it's you get frozen, it's not really a big problem. It could be a problem if it detonates dead, but now when we have so much damage reduction and stuff like that and life pool, yeah, you're not gonna die from detonate dead anyway. So other is if you want the expensive version here, which I have here. I had one from my previous build, so I used Bottle of Faith. Bottle of Faith, if you lay it down, because we're gonna need some crit. That's why I'm using this. Also, I want to craft on this so you get implicit there increased global crit, because in our tree here, if you can bring up, we are trying to activate elemental overload. So when we're spinning around on our boss with Cyclone, we are trying to get that 40% more elemental damage if we have crit for in the last 8 seconds. So with that said, it's this one helps a lot, but you can also use a normal crit flask if you want that too. But this one is obviously the best version, and of course a sulfide flask is really good on its own because it's 40% increased damage and concentrated ground. So anyway, I would definitely have a sulfide flask in my build at any way if I didn't even have this sulfide flask right here. If you want some more life, I would recommend one of these two flasks, because basically we have so much life pool, we want something that it's regaining a lot of our life, because a normal life flask would barely make a dent into this high life pool. So we would need some of these, but again, we have so much regen, not needed. Other ones are just basalt flask for any more physical reduction. Again, we have so much because of our endurance charges and Pantheons, and like a quicksilver flask for curse immunity. That is for those maps which have temporal chains, so we don't get slowed down too much. But I think that is the flask. Let's go to the next. Let's talk about the jewels. Before I start that, I just want to tell you that if you want the exact jewels I'm having, it's going to be super expensive, and it only gives you that little extra, like that 1% extra damage. So they're absolutely not needed. Use your common sense and craft for your budget. And obviously, if you want to min-max this, you probably want to go with the same jewels as I am having right here. But let's start with our cluster jewels, because those are well, basically the most important, but you can pick other nodes on the tree until you're having those, which I will show in the passive tree section. So the most important one is Burning Bright. I have Burning Bright on every single jewel here, as you can see. Burning Bright, Burning Bright, Burning Bright, and probably don't have it on this one because this is a Megalomaniac jewel. But on all the other ones I have Burning Bright because it gives us fire damage over time multiplier, which is super strong for this build. Increased fire damage, increased area effect, all those free stats are super important for us. So I would highly recommend to get those on all the jewels. And also on top of that, we are having a tons of good stats on these ones. We can have a widespread destruction. The third one doesn't matter because we're not going to path to it, so it can be anything. But something to remember, it needs to be adds 8 passive skills, because otherwise you're going to need to use 1 extra skill point to just path to whatever you need to go. So that would lose 1 passive skills. So basically when I'm buying these and crafting them, I'm crafting these myself, of course, because it's much better. So what I'm doing is, let's say for the medium ones here, which is super easy to craft and super expensive if you're gonna buy them, is what I did was I bought item level 68 to 74. So in between that, I'm buying the jewel and I'm buying with the add 4 passives or 5 passive. It does not matter for medium ones because it's the same amount of points you need to path. I can show you here because here's one with 5. We just don't take this one. We just take the 4 points we need. Anyway, but on large ones, you're gonna need an 8 passive. Otherwise, you're gonna spend 1 more. And when I have the item level 68 to 74, I'm just chaos spamming it until I'm hitting 2 good stats. And while 1 is Burning Bright, which is fairly common on these jewels. So whatever else I'm getting is probably gonna be something that's useful for me. If it's really good, it's Flow of Life here, of course, but highly unlikely because Flow of Life has a really low roll rate. So yeah. If it doesn't have a jewel socket, just trade it to the vendor and it will create a jewel socket for you. So that's something to remember and something got patched in a few weeks back. Other ones, just take anything that is damage over time. Basically anything that is fire damage multiplier or damage over time multiplier. Anything like that is good on our jewels. Sorry, there we go. And next we can also talk about my Megalomaniac. The reason why I can run all these 4 auras is because I'm having one of these as Purifier has 30% reduced mana reservation, and together with my helmet enchant, which is Malevolence, and together with my Enlighten here, that means I'm gonna actually afford, and plus these 3 nodes right here, it's gonna make me afford 1. It's a lot of investment for not very much. So yeah, it's not needed, absolutely not needed. I kind of got obsessed with fitting that into the build, and I probably invested too much into it when I could have just used much better jewels in the end. But here it is. Another one is Thread of Hope. The reason was because I was pathing so much in this direction. So instead, I'm just using a Thread of Hope. That means I can, in between these 2 lines, I can just allocate any nodes here. So there, and all of these. That means I don't need to go anywhere close to this area, which saves me a lot of points. Also, something I would take if I had 1 more point is this node right here. Because, well, we are staff based, so we are gonna utilize this pretty well. And otherwise I'm just using these 2 to get the life and reduce mana cost. Another unique jewels I'm using is our Might of the Meek. Might of the Meek is very good because it boosts our effect on all of these nodes right here, right here, right here. So as you can see, it gives us 7 instead of the normal 5, 15 instead of the normal 10, and stuff like that. And we are a little bit starved on stats, so that helps us a lot on all of these. So highly recommend Might of the Meek, and it's quite cheap also, so don't worry about the price. Next unique I'm using is a Watcher's Eye. Obviously it's a luxury here, and it only gives me some extra regen, but the ones you usually looking for is the two stats you can see me having here, and also there's another malevolence, is damage over time, which is probably better for this build overall, but I found this one for a cheap price and I just bought it up. So really good if you want some extra damage and also regen. For the normal jewels, we are just looking for anything that is good for us here. Maximum life, of course, is on all of these jewels. We can see here, life here, life here, and then it's damage over time, fire damage, multiplier, burning damage, area damage, anything that can boost our overall righteous fire, increase damage, fire damage. I searched on increased maximum life and increased fire damage on all of these because those are both prefixes, the only ones that can boost us here generally. And then I just filled in with whatever other stats that I could find on our suffixes. So with all of that, the ones that I'm not using right now, and you could use if you want some extra, well, quality of life, is enduring composure. Enduring composure, sorry. Is gain 1 endurance charge every second if you've been hit recently. The reason for that is because, well, as you can see, I don't have really a problem with endurance charges now because I'm gaining endurance charges while I'm killing. But if you're not killing fast enough, then this might be a really good one. Then you can just relax and never use Enduring Cry during mapping. Sometimes when I'm traveling between packs, it can drop endurance charges. So this one would take care of that, and it's a small jewel, so you just take out one of these and just repath into it. Otherwise, it's just normal things like Federal could also be boosting if you don't wanna, but I don't think it's worth the points, honestly, where we're getting so much damage from normal jewels. And some stats or some resistance if you're starving on something like that would also go for our jewels. So with that said, let's go to the next. I forgot to mention a thing, it's our Abyss Jewel, which is super important, and it's because we have lightning damage on attacks here, and it's activating our elemental equilibrium. Without that, we have no elemental damage here. Make sure it's either lightning damage or cold damage here. And you have some extra life, some other extra damaging nodes here. Just take a look here, there's a bunch of nodes that can benefit us, and otherwise you can have also cold and lightning on your gloves. Make sure it's not fire, guys, because that is gonna buff our enemies, not debuff them. For our skill gems, we are using Righteous Fire and Val Righteous Fire here for our main damage. We are linking it to increased area of effect, but Awakener is obviously better gem if you can afford it. It's not super expensive, but of course, as any Awakener gem, it's a little bit more expensive than a normal version. Concentrated effect you can switch in for important bosses. I'm only switching it in for the very high-end one, which is the Conquerors and Guardians and Cyrus and stuff like that. So those are the ones that I'm switching in for. I'm having it here just in case. Efficacy is a really good one. Also, highly recommend. Make sure you quality up and level 21 it if you want the min-max. Elemental Focus, again, Awakener version is really good, so if you have that one. Awaken Burning Damage, also very good, also very inexpensive in the Awakener form. Not many are buying these, so super cheap to buy. And Empower if you can afford it. Otherwise, there's plenty of other options if you just take a look at the guide that I'm gonna link here in the description. So you can switch this one out if you cannot afford it. For our helmet, we're using as a movement skill, we're using Dash, and we are linking it with Second Wind. So that means we have 2 charges of Dash, and the same thing with Enduring Cry, which has 2 charges now also, which helps us sometimes on, well, in the beginning of the map, I'm just using Enduring Cry to get my endurance charges up. So that means I have 1 more in stock. It's just something to have extra off. And I'm using portal also because I'm lazy. I have my portal scrolls, but I'm been lazy of using them and picking them up. For our boots, we're using our auras here. We have Enlighten, Link to Malevolence, Purity of Fire, and Vitality. We're only using Vitality if we are using the Watcher's Eye here. So if you're not having the Watcher's Eye with the Vitality here, I would not recommend using it. It would be kind of a waste, honestly, because Vitality is good for our build, but we have so much regen on other spots. Yeah, if you're needing it to sustain yourself, as you can see here, I'm not needing it. He's been standing in the hideout with 0 charges. For our gloves, I have my Curse on Hit set up, which is Cyclone. And if we're using Awaken Curse on Hit, that means we can apply 2 curses here, because it has that extra line at level 5. Supported skill can apply an additional curse. So, but this one is quite expensive, and if you don't have it, it's not needed. Elemental Weakness and Flammability is the ones you want to go for. If you don't have the intelligence, then you can go for something else like Temporal Chains or something like that. Also something to go with here is a Cyclone. It's gonna activate the 2 basic thing here. It's gonna activate our Elemental Equilibrium through our Cyclone there, because it gives us lightning damage here, because I have that on one of my jewels. And also Elemental Overload, which means that it's gonna be activating 40% of elemental damage if you crit recently. So if you're critting enough or spinning around enough on our bosses, it's gonna activate all of that. So with that said, those are my link setup. I will not change a single thing here. It's pretty ironed out. So let's go to the next. For our passive tree, it's quite simple. We just want to pick up as much life and sockets as we can. And we just want to path our way to these 2 areas so we can put in our cluster jewels. Otherwise, if you do not have cluster jewels like I had in the beginning, then I would definitely path into these nodes right here. I would also path up right here and just take some extra, well, if you don't have the Thread of Hope. Otherwise, you still want Elemental Equilibrium, you still want Elemental Overload, but there's also some good nodes right here. So I pathed in here in the beginning to get this, and I also pathed over here to get these extra ones, and I also pathed up here to get these multipliers right here, plus the life node right here. With that said, there's not much to it. We just want to pick up as many, depending on how many jewel sockets you have or how many jewels you actually have, then you want to just path into those as fast as possible. And endurance charges are super important for us also. And I needed this one, just some extra movement speed and dexterity, because we're starving a little bit on dexterity. So I pathed all the way over there also. And yeah, that's basically it. Endurance charges gives us a lot of regen, so super important there also. And if you're going for the extra auras, then you might want to path into these ones on top of this. So that is my passive tree. Our Ascendancy choice is Chieftain, because it gives us more damage and more survivability than the Juggernaut. The only plus side with Juggernaut, in my view, is that you are auto-generating endurance charges. But we already talked about that in previous session. It's not really a problem in endgame about the endurance charges. We have such great ways of gaining those endurance charges anyway, so even the downside is not really a downside in the end. So for our choices, we are going with Valko, Storm Embrace here. Some extra regen for every endurance charge. More damage if you lost endurance charge. It's not going to be really applicable to us because we're going to be at max endurance charges anyway. Gain endurance charge every second if you use the Warcry, which is really good. That means I can just put in a Warcry in the beginning of the map and it will gain me the endurance charge. And maximum endurance charge is really nice also. Then the second one is going to be Talio, Cleansing Water. It's fire resistance, which means together with our Purity of Fire, it's not gonna you basically don't need to. You're gonna be overcapped on fire resistance, so we don't need to spend any points or any stats or anything into that fire resistant. Regen 2%, really nice. Physical damage from hits taken as fire damage, really important one, together with the mod I have on my helmet, because 50% increased life recovery rate if you're taking a fire damage taken from an enemy hit recently, which means that's going to be basically every hit. So that is going to be a lot of extra regen every time you get hit. So if you get hit, you're going to be regen up very fast. Then we're gonna go with fire damage over time multiplier here and damage penetrate fire resistance. I don't think this one actually is applicable, the damage penetrate version, because we're not hitting the enemy. So I'm pretty sure that one doesn't affect us. But fire damage multiplier is really, really strong. Then the last one is cover rare and unique enemies in ash for 10 seconds, really good, and 10% increased strength. That's why we try to get as much strength on our build, because it gives us extra life and so on. So those are my Ascendancies. The other ones are not very applicable, because those are mostly for totems and stuff like that. So not very good for us. So let's go to the next. For our Pantheons, I highly recommend you go with Soul of Solaris to just basically, I went with this one the full time. You can also go with Soul of Lunaris, but I just wanted to go extra tanky and just be extra safe. So Soul of Solaris is the bossing option. If you want faster mapping, go with Soul of Lunaris. For our minor ones, I always pick this one, because after the nerf of Solo Shakiri in this league, it gives us extra movement speed and some extra evasion, and if you have taken a savage hit recently. So if I'm getting hit really hard, that means I'm gonna evade and probably be at max health by the time they get around to hitting me again. So very good here. For our bandits, I want you to kill them all, because 2 points into any cluster jewels is gonna be much more worth it than any of the rewards that bandits is gonna give you. So kill them all. Thank you so much for staying this long into the video, and I just want to recommend that I have a linked written guide here in the description. It's not my guide, but it's really, really well written, and this guy has obviously put in a lot of time into the Righteous Fire and a lot of theory crafting and a lot of thinking about all the different aspects of it. But if you have any questions, just leave them in the comment field below, and I will try to get back to you as fast as I can. Like and subscribe will help me a lot and achieve my goals of getting that first YouTube plaque somewhere in the near future. Hopefully before the next millennia though. So, have an awesome day everyone.